The East Bay community has been around since the 1800s. There were more buildings and families in the early days, but due to a variety of circumstances, most of the buildings have either deteriorated beyond repair or have been removed for other reasons. In its heyday, East Bay was a vibrant year-round community with a school, a store, a telephone exchange, and at Shaw Point, a post office. Below are a few examples of what the interior of some of those old buildings look like. Gert Wellish. Although Gert had been coming to the island since the early 1900s, she was fairly new to East Bay. She started out at the West Bay Lodge, where her father was one of the original investors, and migrated to the lighthouse that she rented for 18 years before building a charming cottage in East Bay. In 1942, Gert visited the island with her friend Muriel until her death in 1966. Muriel continued visiting into the 1970s. Gert's cottage still stands at the southmost edge of East Bay. This photo shows the interior of Gert's cottage. We see Muriel standing after having served dinner to a mixture of MB dolls and CO dolls. Doll family photos. This is the interior of Gert's cottage. The Apostle Islands Historic Preservation Conservancy is leading a drive to have Gert and Muriel's cottage, Plenty Charm, restored. This photo looks at the same wall as in the other photo. Doll family photo. Heading north along the bay, we see the Lawfields, an old Sand Island family. They had immigrated from Norway in the early 1900s. This home no longer stands in the bay. Dad's sister Mabel married Magnus Lawfield, so we are related by marriage. In this photo, Roger and his mother Mabel sit on their neat porch in the 1940s. The porch can be seen in the insert on the right. Mabel and Magnus's wedding is one of the few that took place on the island. Their home set back a few hundred feet from the lake, so it couldn't be seen from the water. Doll family photo, BHA. An old checkering piano sat in the living room. This piano belonged to Mabel's mother, Constance Ingebrigtsen Dahl, and was moved from her and Harold's home in the north of the bay after she died in 1915. Behind the curtain was the kitchen. It is interesting to me there are apparently two college pendant-looking flags on the wall to the left. Doll family photo, BHA. The Palms go way back in island history. Ludwig Palm married Bessie Nelson, Constance Dahl's daughter by her first marriage. The Palms came to the island in the early 1900s through a relative named Bondi. An old log home stood on the property we know as Palms. This was before my time on the island. A very large family, various members either visited or lived on the island over the century. This photo shows Howard Palm cooking breakfast in their island kitchen. The insert shows the moving of the original Herman Johnson Sr. Bay home to the Palm property back in 1954. Herman built his home in the late 1920s when he moved from the north of the bay to the middle of the bay. Interesting enough, Herman's original home still stands on a property in Redcliffe. Howard Palm was the last of the leaseholders to stay in East Bay. Brian Tanning family photo. The Palm extended family, Howard in pink, is an uncle or great uncle to the kids shown playing cards and kibitzing. They sit on the porch that the extended family added in the 60s or 70s. The porch served as a living room, den, dining room, and bedroom. Brian Tanning family photo. The MB Dolls. Mel Dahl bought the old Dr. Deason property just to the north of Bondi Palms. He and his family, consisting of wife Adele and 5 boys, lived in the home for many years. As the boys grew, he added to the porch and increased the size of the home by about 1/3 by building additional space to the right in the inserted photo. Four boys pose on the MB Dahl front porch. From the left are Philip, Harold, standing is their cousin Bill, and sitting is brother David. Most porches had a place to sleep during warm, dry weather. Dahl family photo. Adele's sister Arlene and Aunt Adele do the dishes in their small, neat kitchen on Sand Island. One made do with the space they had. At several homes, a gas refrigerator would be placed on a porch connected to the kitchen. Arlene and kids visited often, as well as Adele's brother Sig, who actually owned the Herman Johnson home at the time it was sold to the Palms in 1954. Harold Dahl family photo. Carl O. Dahl and Elma Hanson Dahl were born of old Sand Island families. After they married in 1930, they lived for a few years in the old Harold Dahl home. Carl's brother Melvin gave them 300 feet of land next to him in the middle of East Bay. The new Dahls built a very comfortable home on the exact spot that the park ranger station now sits. For some reason, a previous park administration tore down the home. In the photo, Elma and Carl relax in their living room in the mid to late 1950s. They only lived in the home year-round for 2 years. The home was the only insulated structure on the island, and they intended to fish and enjoy their comfortable island life into retirement. The sea lamprey and a growing school-age family changed all that. They left full-time living on the island in 1944. Dahl family photo, BHA. Alma Dahl loved to read. Once her chores were done and all the kids were outside playing, she would relax and read. I show this photo to demonstrate that our home was not just a summer retreat, but an actual home. We had big windows all along the front for uninterrupted views of Lake Superior and the bay. Lace curtains and a big sofa graced our living room. Our large porch was a favorite gathering place for not only the CO Dahls, but many others in the bay. Dahl family photo. The Noring family came from Norway in the early 1900s. They, along with the Hansons and Herman Johnsons, came from the same area of Norway. They first settled on the island about a half-mile back into the woods, where they had an extensive farm operation. They built virtually the same home closer to the shore in the 1930s. They left year-round living the same year my folks left. Their field home is shown in the insert. It still stood when I was a kid, but had been abandoned years before. I also knew the Norings to live down near the water. Miss Birgit Noring, my godmother, stands outside their bay home. They had a nice barn that stood about where the photographer must have stood to take this photo. After the Norings left the island, we explored the barn many times looking for treasures. There was an old still for making moonshine, as well as some barrel staves with Product of Canada stamped on them. This was a reminder of the whiskey running days of Prohibition. The Coles ended up buying the home in the 60s. The next 3 homes have no known interior photos taken by the original owners. The Jacob Johnsons, my great-grandparents, had quite an extensive operation alongside the Moes. This included logging, fishing, and farming. The Moes and Jacob Johnson were among the first Norwegians to settle in East Bay way back in the 1880s. They partnered in some operations. The upper photo is the Jacob Johnson home long after it was abandoned. It stood when I was a child, but there had been so much erosion the bank has caved in to the left of the home. The Herman Johnson Senior Home can be seen tucked into the trees where the campground is today. This is a home the Palms bought and moved to their property a quarter-mile south in the bay, next to the MB Dahls. In the far background is the Noring home that barely can be seen. Dahl family photo, BHA. There are no known photos of the inside of any of the multiple buildings that stood on the Moe property. The Moes had quite an extensive operation, including logging, fishing, and farming. They had come into East Bay in the 1880s. The Hansons settled on the island in the 1890s with the Dahls and Herman Johnson in the early 1900s. The White House in the insert is the Moe home. The house to the left is the logging quarters for the loggers who stayed on the island. The dock in front was the Jacob Johnson dock. The big photo has the Moe home in the background. A young Moe girl is in front with Mrs. Lewick, Dor Hanson, Jake Hanson, and Mrs. Moe enjoying the spring flowers. Dahl family photo, BHA. A rare inside photo from one of the earlier homes in East Bay. Much of the problem with inside photography in the early 1900s is that there were no flash bulbs. This is inside the Harold Dahl home. His home, his wife died in 1915, was rather sparse and rustic. It sat behind the Hanson property, so was not on the water. Pictured from left are Bill Noring, Magnus Lawfield, Carl O'Dahl, and Elvis Moe. In the insert are two palms and Harold Dahl relaxing outside Harold's home. Some of the foundation from this home can be found along the path to the lighthouse. Dahl family photo, BHA. Sharon Dahl, Carl Dahl Jr., and Fred's son Greg Dahl sit on the porch of the old Hanson home. At this time, the home was owned by the Westhagen family. Please note the meticulous log work on the wall. Dahl family photo. This photo shows the fireplace in the Hanson home. It was allegedly made of rocks gathered from all the islands in the Apostle Archipelago. This photo was taken in 2010 when the Park Service owned the property. Several of the structures from the Hanson homestead are being preserved by the Park Service. Dahl family photo. This is a home of my great-grandparents Pete and Dorothea Hanson. It is on the north side of East Bay. As their family grew, they added to their modest structure. Pictured is Dorothea Hanson as she sits up in her sickbed. She died soon after this photo was taken. I find the little doodads on the wall interesting. Dahl family photo, BHA. Technically, Herman Johnson Sr. did not live in East Bay, but just north of the northernmost point in the bay. I include him for two reasons. First of all, he was considered a resident of East Bay even before he moved to the middle of the bay in the 1920s. And secondly, the original home still stands, not on Sand Island, but on the mainland. According to Myron Lohman, the Johnson Sr. home was moved across the ice in the 1920s and was used by Herman Johnson Jr. As his and Ag's home for several years before being moved again to Redcliffe, where it still stands. These photos show the Herman and Hetty Johnson home as it stood on Sand Island in the 1900s and now in Redcliffe. The logs have been covered with siding and the roof with metal. I show a photo from inside the structure, now a storage shed, where the tight log work on the inside still can be seen. I would guess that this home is at least 115 years old and is still, for the most part, solid. Dahl family photo. There are two other structures on Sand Island that are still standing, but aren't at East Bay or at Shaw Point. This is the West Bay Lodge. It was originally a lodge for Twin City bigwigs and was later used as a logging camp, and still later for the use of the Peters family from Mellon, Wisconsin. Dahl family photo. The last building shown is the Sand Island Lighthouse, which still stands sentinel on the northeast point of the island. The insert is a painting by Peter Yench. This interior photo must have been taken during the Hewling stewardship of the lighthouse, as they created a very livable space.